Michael Carter stepped out of the back seat of a sleek black SUV, his polished leather shoes clicking softly against the pavement. The bright lights of the Carter Grand Hotel shone down on him, illuminating the magnificent building that bore his name. He took a deep breath, looking up at the towering structure with a quiet sense of pride. This hotel was more than just a business to him. It was a symbol of his relentless hard work, resilience, and success. But tonight, he wasn't here as the owner. He was here as a guest. Michael had built his empire from the ground up, starting with a single rundown motel he had invested in during his early 20s. Over the years, he had expanded, renovated, and acquired more properties until he became one of the most influential figures in the hospitality industry. Despite his achievements, he never forgot where he came from. He knew the struggles of being underestimated, of walking into rooms where people doubted his abilities simply because of his background or the color of his skin. He had worked twice as hard to prove himself, and now he was at the top. However, being at the top didn't mean he was oblivious to what went on in his own hotels. He had always believed that the true essence of hospitality lay in how customers were treated, whether they were wealthy businessmen, celebrities, or just an average person looking for a weekend getaway. That's why he regularly tested his employees by checking into his hotels without revealing who he was. It was his way of ensuring that every guest received the respect and service they deserved. Tonight was one of those nights. Instead of arriving in a limousine or making a grand entrance, he had chosen a modest approach. He wore a simple but well-tailored navy blue suit, nothing flashy or overly expensive looking. His wristwatch was elegant but not extravagant. His suitcase was a classic leather travel bag, showing subtle signs of wear. Anyone who didn't know him would assume he was just another businessman visiting the city, and that was exactly what he wanted. As he made his way toward the entrance, he noticed the doorman greeting guests with warm smiles. A couple in expensive attire walked past him and were immediately welcomed inside. When it was Michael's turn, he received a brief nod, nothing more. It wasn't rude, but it also wasn't the kind of welcoming energy he expected from one of his hotels. He took note of it, but said nothing. He wanted to see how the rest of the staff would treat him. Inside, the lobby was just as stunning as he remembered. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a golden glow across the marble floors. Plush seating areas were arranged neatly, with guests lounging as they sipped cocktails from the bar. The ambiance exuded class, and it pleased Michael to see his vision come to life. But tonight, he wasn't here to admire the decor. He was here to observe. He approached the front desk, where a young woman stood behind the counter, scrolling through the computer screen. She barely looked up when he stopped in front of her. Her name tag read, Jessica. "Good evening," Michael said in a polite tone. Jessica glanced at him briefly, her expression indifferent. "Checking in?" she asked, her voice lacking the warmth she had just used with the previous guest. "Yes, the reservation should be under the name Michael Evans," he replied. He had purposely booked the room under a different last name. If anyone saw Carter, they might recognize him, and he wanted to avoid any special treatment. Jessica sighed lightly and began typing on the keyboard. As she searched for his reservation, Michael noticed her subtle change in body language. She eyed his attire quickly, her lips pressing into a thin line, as if assessing whether he belonged there. It was a look he had seen many times before in different settings. After a few moments, she frowned at the screen. "I don't see a reservation under that name," she said, her tone already carrying a hint of doubt. Michael remained calm. Could you check again? I made the booking earlier today. Jessica let out a short breath, as though he was inconveniencing her. She clicked a few more times before shaking her head. Nope, nothing under Michael Evans. Are you sure you booked the right hotel? Michael's patience remained steady. Yes, I'm sure. This is the Carter Grand, right? Obviously, she replied, her voice holding a slight edge of condescension. Michael kept his expression neutral. He wasn't surprised, but he was disappointed. He had hoped that his staff would uphold the values he had built this business on: respect, inclusivity, and excellent service. Yet, here he was, experiencing the exact kind of treatment he had fought against his whole life. Jessica sighed again. Well, if you don't have a reservation, the rooms we have available tonight are premium suites, and they're not exactly cheap. Michael raised an eyebrow at her tone. There was no reason for her to mention the price so pointedly, except to suggest that he might not be able to afford it. He had seen her. Jessica tapped her nails against the desk, glancing at Michael with a skeptical expression. She had dealt with all kinds of guests during her time at the Carter Grand Hotel: wealthy business executives, celebrities, and high-profile clients who expected nothing but the best. But this man, he didn't fit the image of someone who belonged in a place like this. His suit was nice but not designer. His suitcase looked well worn, not like the pristine luxury luggage carried by their usual clientele. Everything about him seemed ordinary, and in Jessica's mind, that was enough reason to doubt he was in the right place. She folded her arms and sighed. Are you sure you even made a reservation here? This isn't some budget hotel, you know, she said, her voice laced with condescension. Michael met her gaze, calm and composed. I'm sure. I made the reservation earlier today, under the name Michael Evans. Could you check again? Jessica let out an exaggerated sigh, shaking her head as if she was doing him a favor. She tapped on the keyboard with unnecessary force, scrolling through the system. After a few moments, she smirked slightly. Nope, nothing under that name, she said, tilting her head. Are you sure you didn't mix up the dates, or maybe book a different hotel? Michael's jaw tightened slightly, but he refused to let her rudeness get to him. I'm sure this is the right hotel, and the reservation was confirmed. Jessica pursed her lips. Well, there's nothing here, she said, crossing her arms. And just so you know, even if you did have a reservation, the suites here are quite expensive. Maybe you should double-check where you booked, because people sometimes get confused when they see the name Carter Grand and assume it's part of a different chain. Michael studied her carefully. She wasn't just being unhelpful, she was deliberately trying to make him feel unwelcome. The subtle hints in her tone, the way she emphasized the word expensive, and the dismissive look in her eyes all pointed to the same thing. She didn't think he could afford to stay there. Are you implying I can't afford a room here? He asked, his voice even. Jessica gave a small forced laugh. I'm just saying, our clientele is a bit exclusive, she replied. We don't usually have last-minute walk-ins unless they're VIPs, and our suites are in high demand. Michael raised an eyebrow. And what exactly makes someone a VIP? Jessica shrugged. You know, high-profile guests, celebrities, corporate executives, people who fit the kind of clientele we cater to. Michael nodded slowly. I see, and you've decided I don't fit that image. Jessica gave him a thin smile. I just like to be upfront with guests so there's no confusion. I wouldn't want anyone to feel out of place or uncomfortable, especially if this hotel isn't in their price range. Michael knew this wasn't just about hotel policies. He had seen it too many times before, people making snap judgments based on appearance, treating some guests with warmth and respect, while looking down on others. It was disappointing, but he kept his composure. Let's assume I don't have a reservation, he said, keeping his tone neutral. Do you have any rooms available for tonight? Jessica hesitated for a moment before answering. Well, We do have suites available, but as I mentioned, they're quite pricey. The cheapest one left is our executive suite, and that goes for over $1,000 a night. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. That won't be a problem, he said, pulling out a black credit card and placing it on the counter. Jessica's eyes flicked to the card, but instead of immediately processing the payment, she hesitated. It was as if she didn't want to believe he could afford it. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I mean, we do require a deposit, and there are additional charges for room service, valet, and other amenities." Michael's patience was wearing thin. "I'm sure," he replied firmly. "Now, will you book the room, or should I speak to the manager?" Jessica stiffened slightly at the mention of the manager, but she quickly masked it with a smirk. "Well, I just don't want there to be any misunderstandings. We've had situations before where guests assume they can afford a stay, and then cause issues with payment later." Michael held her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Is that so?" "Yes," she said, placing her hands on the counter. "And since we have a reputation to uphold, we have to be selective about who we accommodate. We can't just let anyone in." The meaning behind her words was clear. Michael exhaled slowly. He had come here tonight, hoping to test the professionalism of his staff, but instead, he was witnessing firsthand the kind of discrimination he had worked his whole life to eliminate. What Jessica didn't realize was that her words and actions were about to have serious consequences. But for now, Michael simply gave her a knowing smile and said, "I see. Well, maybe you should call your manager. I'd love to hear what they think about this policy of yours." Michael took a deep breath, keeping his composure despite the clear disrespect he was facing. He had dealt with people like Jessica before, individuals who made quick judgments based on appearance, assuming that wealth and success had a certain look. He had worked too hard to let a narrow-minded receptionist ruin his night. "Listen," he said, his voice steady. "I don't want any trouble. I made a reservation, and I'm willing to pay for a room. There's no reason to make this complicated." Jessica, however, wasn't backing down. She gave him a fake smile, her fingers still resting on the keyboard. "Sir, I already told you, there's no reservation under your name, and frankly, I find your persistence a little suspicious." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious? Yes," she said, crossing her arms. "You claim to have a reservation, but I don't see one. Now you suddenly want to pay for a suite. Most of our high-end guests don't just walk in off the street." Before Michael could respond, Jessica turned to the side and pressed a button under the desk. Within seconds, two uniformed security guards approached. They were tall, broad-shouldered men who looked like they had handled their fair share of disturbances. "What's the problem, ma'am?" one of them asked. Jessica pointed at Michael. "This man is insisting he has a reservation, but there's nothing under his name. Now he's getting aggressive and refusing to leave." Michael's jaw tightened. He had been nothing but calm, yet Jessica was twisting the situation to make him seem like a threat. It was a tactic he had seen before, people using security as a means of intimidation. The guards turned their attention to Michael, their expressions neutral but firm. "Sir, if you don't have a reservation, we're going to have to ask you to leave," one of them said. Michael held up his hands, still calm, but growing increasingly frustrated. "I haven't done anything wrong. I simply asked her to check my reservation, and when she couldn't find it, I offered to book a room on the spot." Jessica scoffed. "And I already told you, our suites are very expensive. We don't have time for people who just want to look around or cause trouble." Before Michael could reply, the lobby doors slid open, and a well-dressed man in a tailored suit strolled in. The moment he reached the front desk, Jessica's demeanor changed completely. "Mr. Whitmore," she greeted, her tone suddenly sweet and professional. "Welcome back. We have your usual penthouse suite ready for you." The man, a wealthy businessman Michael recognized from industry events, gave her a nod. "Perfect. I assume everything is in order." "Of course, sir," Jessica said with a bright smile.
Would you like a complimentary bottle of wine sent to your room? Michael watched the interaction in silence, his patience reaching its limit. It was crystal clear. Jessica had no problem providing excellent service to those she deemed important, but for him, he was treated like an intruder. He decided right then that it was time to put an end to this charade. Before Michael could say another word, a firm voice interrupted the commotion. What's going on here? All eyes turned toward the man approaching the front desk. David Reynolds, the hotel manager, walked briskly toward them, his sharp suit and confident posture making it clear he was in charge. His gaze moved from Jessica to the two security guards, before finally landing on Michael. Before Michael could open his mouth, Jessica jumped in, eager to defend herself. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm so sorry you had to come down here," she said quickly, casting Michael a disdainful glance. "This man has been causing trouble at the front desk. He claimed to have a reservation, but I checked, and there was nothing under his name. Then he tried to insist on booking a suite at the last minute, which of course is unusual. When I explained that our suites are expensive and exclusive, he got defensive. I called security, because I didn't want any problems." Michael watched as Jessica confidently spun the situation to make herself look like the victim. She spoke with the certainty of someone who believed she had done nothing wrong. David frowned slightly, his expression unreadable. "And you're sure about all of this?" he asked, his tone measured. "Absolutely," Jessica said, nodding. "I mean, just look at him. He doesn't seem like the kind of person who would stay here." The moment those words left her mouth, David's face drained of color. His eyes widened, and his posture stiffened as though he had just been hit with a realization. He looked at Michael again, this time, truly looked at him. Michael met his gaze with an unwavering stare, waiting for recognition to settle in. It didn't take long. The shift in David's expression was almost comical. His eyes darted between Michael and Jessica, his throat bobbing as he swallowed nervously. Beads of sweat formed at his temple as he suddenly realized the gravity of the situation. "Jessica," he said slowly, his voice now laced with urgency, "do you have any idea who this man is?" Jessica blinked, clearly caught off guard by his reaction. "What?" He said his name was Michael Evans, but there's no reservation under that name. "I don't. His name isn't Michael Evans," David interrupted, his voice now shaking slightly. He turned fully toward Michael, his demeanor shifting from authority to something bordering on panic. "Mr. Carter, I didn't realize." Jessica's confident smirk vanished in an instant. Her mouth opened slightly, as if trying to process what she had just heard. "Wait, what?" she whispered, looking between David and Michael. David inhaled sharply, clearly horrified. "Jessica, this is Michael Carter." Jessica frowned, still confused. "Okay, and..." David exhaled sharply, as if she had just said the most foolish thing imaginable. He turned toward her, his voice tight with disbelief. "As in Michael Carter, the owner of the Carter Grand Hotels." Jessica stood frozen, her face draining of all color, as David's words echoed in her mind. Michael Carter, the owner of the Carter Grand Hotels. Her breath hitched. The realization hit her like a freight train. The man she had belittled, dismissed, and accused of not belonging, was not just any guest. He was the owner, of the entire hotel chain. The two security guards, who had been standing on either side of Michael, exchanged nervous glances. Their postures, once firm and authoritative, now slumped as they too realized their grave mistake. Michael remained calm, watching their reactions with quiet scrutiny. He had expected some level of bias, but the open condescension, the way he had been treated like an unwelcome outsider in his own establishment, was more than just a mistake. It was a failure in the very culture he had worked so hard to build. David turned to Jessica, his face red with fury. "What were you thinking?" he hissed. "You humiliated our owner. You insulted him, disrespected him, and even called security on him." Jessica opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her usual smug confidence was gone. "I didn't know," she stammered weakly. He didn't say who he was. Michael finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. And if I weren't the owner, would that have made your behavior acceptable? Jessica blinked rapidly. I just thought, you thought I didn't belong here. Michael finished for her. You saw a man who didn't fit your narrow image of wealth, and immediately assumed he was out of place. Instead of treating me with the same professionalism and respect you give every other guest, you made a judgment based on appearance. That is not just a mistake, Jessica, that is a failure of character. Jessica's breathing grew shallow. I didn't mean to offend you, sir. It was just a misunderstanding. Michael shook his head. No, a misunderstanding is when a name is misspelled in the system. What you did was make an assumption, and then you doubled down on it. Even when I politely explained that I had a reservation, you treated me with suspicion. Even when I offered to pay up front, you looked for reasons to doubt me. And the worst part, you showed immediate respect to another guest, because he looked the part. Jessica's eyes darted to David, searching for support, but the manager's expression remained cold and furious. Michael turned to the security guards. And you too, you were so quick to treat me like a trespasser. Did it ever cross your minds to ask questions before treating me like a problem? One of the guards swallowed hard. We were just following procedure, sir. Michael arched an eyebrow. Really? I don't recall jump to conclusions being part of security training. The guards had no response. David turned to Jessica, his voice laced with finality. You're fired, effective immediately. Jessica's eyes widened in panic. Wait please, Mr. Reynolds. I've worked here for years, and you just proved you haven't learned a thing. David snapped. We don't tolerate discrimination here. Pack your things and leave. Jessica opened her mouth again, but no words came. She turned to Michael, as if hoping for mercy, but he simply held her gaze. She had humiliated him without hesitation, and now she was facing the consequences of her own actions. As she stumbled away in shock, Michael turned back to David. Make sure security gets proper retraining. This should never happen again. David nodded solemnly. Understood, sir. Michael exhaled. He hadn't come here tonight expecting to teach a lesson, but perhaps it was necessary. Respect and professionalism were not optional in his hotels, and now everyone knew it. Michael gathered the stuff, his voice calm yet firm as he shared his journey from struggling entrepreneur to hotel owner. He emphasized the importance of respect, fairness, and professionalism. The staff listened intently, vowing to change. Before leaving, Michael ensured a new training program was implemented, knowing he had made a lasting impact.